Alex. It's lovely to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So how busy has your phone been since these comments from the Finance Minister?
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely been an increase in conversations had with major companies looking to set up their regional headquarters now in Saudi Arabia. A lot of these companies that we've been speaking to for a long time, and I think it's kind of reinitiated the conversations that we've been having with these companies the closer we get to the 2024 January 1st deadline.
How many companies have got their regional HQs in a row anyway since the initial announcement a couple of years ago?
So since the original announcement, about 162 companies by the end of Q3 were set up with regional headquarter licenses. From my conversations with a couple of the officials in the Ministry of Investment of Saudi Arabia, I think that will be probably over around 200 by the end of the year. Wow.
So let's get into semantics, because a lot of people are, when is an office and when is it a regional HQ?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So basically what Ministry of Investment of Saudi Arabia have done, MISA, is actually issued a RHQ license for foreign companies. So that means that any foreign business that's setting up an RHQ in Saudi Arabia actually needs this RHQ license. And it is actually separate and different to the commercial license that a lot of these companies will most likely already have in Saudi Arabia to be executing on the contracts that they're doing for the government entities.
Do they need to have both?
Yes, in theory, yes. Mainly because if you've got a RHQ license, it will allow you to do RHQ activities. However, it won't actually allow you to do any commercial activities. So any of those companies that are actually executing on their projects presumably will also need a commercial company in Saudi Arabia to then go and execute on the projects that they've won.
What is an RHQ activity?
So RHQ activities are very much around kind of the budgeting and the strategic aspects, maybe some marketing aspects, etc. of the business. But it isn't actually the going out and doing for instance, if it was we've set up a load of kind of construction companies recently in Saudi Arabia. If the construction company wanted to actually go and execute on the building of for instance, a NEOM project, or they're working with maybe the Ministry of Culture, then they would need to have that commercial license to be able to execute on those projects.
You mentioned NEOM, and that's really important because one of the other games of semantics around the regional HQ is what counts as a government contract. Strictly government, mega projects, sovereign wealth funds, semi-government companies?
Yeah, so it's not 100% clear right now, but from what we're seeing is that the PIF projects, which includes the likes of NEOM and others, would need an RHQ to be able to execute on these projects. There are other, as you said, other semantics, maybe the likes of kind of an Aramco or other kind of semi-government entities. What we're seeing is that there's a trend in at least needing, for sure, a commercial license in Saudi Arabia. So we're seeing a lot of companies now go ahead and set up that commercial license. However, the RHQ license is a little bit unsure at the moment as to whether that is needed for some of those projects.
Right. And is it a regional HQ or the regional HQ that you need to be setting up?
This again, it hasn't been. We haven't come across this conversation yet with the Ministry of Investment. We just know that they will need an RHQ license to be able to go and bid on these government projects. And also, it's important that it's not just to start new projects. It will also be for any of these companies that are currently working with government projects in Saudi Arabia will also need this RHQ license to keep working on these government projects as well.
That's interesting, because if you're halfway through executing a project, I mean, no one's going to say, put your tools down, stop building, are they?
You would assume not, and that's why I would encourage every company to have conversations with somebody to discuss these important aspects.
When this was first announced, February 2021, I think, the big conversation was about who needed to be in the office, wasn't it? One of the big conversations. Yes. Where have we got to on that?
So where we are right now is that you will need to hire 15 employees within the first 12 months of operating in Saudi Arabia and getting your license. Those 15 employees can be of all nationalities. They don't have to be local Saudi nationals. You will also need 3 C-level executives to also be in that Saudi Arabian entity, in the RHQ company.
What are the Saudization requirements, though?
For the RHQ, you actually have a 10-year exemption on the Saudization requirements. For the commercial activity, it will vary depending on size of company, the types of activities that you're doing. So it's very much kind of a case-by-case basis.
So who is talking to you? Who are you seeing actually pick up these licenses as first movers in terms of sector and in terms of where they're coming from?
Yeah, it's a good question. We get a whole mix of inquiries, and I think it's very important that this is very much targeting your big kind of multinational companies. You do need 3 branches around the world to be able to qualify to get an RHQ license.
So you can't just be a local golf company?
So you can't just be a local golf company. So if we're only based here in the UAE, you wouldn't actually qualify for an RHQ license in Saudi Arabia.
So does that mean if you're a local UAE company, even if you go and set up a commercial office in Saudi, you wouldn't be able to bid for government contracts?
No. So basically there is this kind of grey area at the moment where if a company is unable to qualify for an RHQ license, they would still be able to work with the government contracts. But what they would need to have is a commercial company, a company with commercial activities in Saudi Arabia to be able to work on any of these contracts. And what we're seeing as well is that it's not just ones for government contracts. We're seeing a lot of the big corporate companies also tell companies that you will need to have a company registered in Saudi Arabia for us to continue working with you. So it's a common trend, I think, with everyone following the government initiative in Saudi Arabia to get those companies to make that move into Saudi Arabia.
I interrupted you. You were telling me who's actually made the move.
Yes. So we're seeing a whole array of sectors. Obviously, construction is a big sector at the moment. Then we're also seeing a lot of the big consultancy firms obviously making that move into Saudi Arabia. There's a big push at the moment in tourism and events as well. So these are the big ones, as well as some of the industrial and manufacturing businesses as well.
Is it more likely to be companies that are already operating in Saudi and the Gulf, or those who are brand new who are doing this?
In theory, yes, it would be mainly the companies that are already in Saudi Arabia because they've been there, they've done it. But we're seeing kind of 3 main buckets. The main bucket is that one, the ones that are working on government projects and need to therefore set up to continue working. We have the other ones, which are people that are being asked to work on government projects but haven't yet made that move. And then there's the third bucket, which we're seeing a huge interest in at the moment, particularly with all of the news coming out of Saudi Arabia, which are the ones that are getting interested about the projects but aren't able to even see or bid on any of these projects because they don't even have a commercial company yet in Saudi Arabia. So we're seeing those big push on all 3 of those.